Yesterday, we heard about the Italian woman forced by an order obtained by her doctors to have a caesarean and then by local services to give up her baby. And earlier we met Mum. The mum left devastated after social services turned up whilst she was in labour to take her baby away.
Well, such shocking cases pose the question whether social services are, in some instances, too quick to act in removing children from their mothers. Here to answer just that, social worker Joanna Nicholas and agony aunt Denise Robertson. And welcome, both of you.
Welcome.
So how many children are you forcibly snatching?
It happens very, very, very rarely. And when it does happen, what we see when you actually see the facts, it is often very different from how it's reported by parents.
We heard in that story from yesterday, the Italian lady, and also from Kelly, who was here this morning. So you're talking about baby snatching, you're talking about forced caesareans. It seems medieval.
It does, Philip, but unfortunately it's very often the way it's portrayed by some aspects of the media, and when you look at the reality, what we have to do is ultimately we have to protect children. And if somebody is unable to do that, if a parent is unable to do that, then our laws say that the state has to step in. And I need to be really clear, social workers don't have the power to do these things. It's not the social workers. They go to the court and apply to the court for an order. The court will hear from all parties and then the court makes the decision.
Denise.
I can't really believe what I'm hearing. If it happens very rarely, why am I besieged by letters? Why do I have midwives approaching me in the street to tell me how much they resent people coming into the labour ward? In one instance, she said, before I had delivered the afterbirth. And I'm sorry, it is not happening rarely. Let me just read you this. A damning study by Professor Jane Ireland, a forensic psychologist, examined more than 127 expert witnesses' reports. She said they were poorly produced by clinicians who no longer practice but earn their living entirely as professional expert witnesses. And it goes on to say MPs are saying they write precisely what social workers want to read. You say people go to court. The court, the family courts, rubber stamp what social workers say. I think that a good social worker cannot be valued in rubies, but something is going wrong. Children are being routinely taken, and then you say the media hears from the parents. No, they don't, because the parents are gagged by an order from the court obtained by social services. People are screaming out about this. Something is going wrong, and it is, you can't forever hide behind the mantra of damned if we do and damned if we don't.
Okay, just a few facts there. First of all, the court is not rubber stamping what social workers want to do. I work in the courts. The court is a process whereby they'll listen to all the parties. The child will be represented. Very often what the local authority wants to happen is thrown out by the court because the court says it doesn't meet the threshold. It happens extremely rarely that children are removed in an emergency. In the past it happened a lot more often, and then I'd like to think that people have learnt from that, because it's not the right way to do it unless you absolutely have to. It happens extremely rarely. And the thing about parents is that if you have your child taken away, it must be one of the worst things that could ever happen to you. And people will change what's happened in their mind to try and make it okay. I could give you so many examples of people I've worked with over the years who've had children taken away, and I've heard them tell their story to other people, and it's changed because the facts are too hard to bear.
And what about what Denise just said there, where you can't rely on saying damned if you do, damned if you don't? I mean, we were talking about the media there and how you say they portray half the story. There's other facts there that cannot be reported. But is it stories, you know, such as those high-profile cases like Baby P, when they're in the paper, does that put you under unnecessary pressure, where sometimes you act too hastily?
The trouble is you can't, yes, you might be able to, social workers might be able to act too hasty in going to the court, but then that's why you've got the court there, you've got the safety net, you've got the child represented, you've got the parents represented.
But they're shrouded in mystery. It's like, it is like MI5, you know, it's shrouded in mystery. You don't know what's going on,
and the child
you can't get to the facts, we don't understand.
The child is protected by a guardian.
The child has to be protected.
The child has a guardian who is probably an ex-social worker. And if it's all so rosy, Joanna, why does a social worker write to me and say, I won't do child protection anymore, the mothers are on a hiding to nothing?
I'm absolutely not saying it's all rosy. Of course it isn't. But all I would say is that we are working with very, very vulnerable people, adults and children. And half of me, and I've always thought, up until recently, I've always thought it's right the local authority doesn't talk out. And it's only when you're actually in care proceedings that you can't talk about it. But the local authority doesn't, because they are there to protect the children and the vulnerable adults. And I've always thought that's right. And then, particularly this week, there's been such distortion of reality and such emotion used and such inaccuracies reported by some aspects of the media, and it's made me change my view, because then one local authority did come out and they gave the timeline, and when you read it you understand why people have to take these actions. It's a horrible thing to do, it's a really horrible thing to be part of, but you have to protect children, and some parents are not able to do that.
I don't want to say too much about the Italian case. We don't know. But two things I will say. One is that social workers make great play about a child's ethnic origins. Why isn't that baby being adopted in Italy, where it belongs? And the other thing is, if a British woman had gone over there for 2 weeks on a course, been detained, had a cesarean, without her consent, and had her baby taken away to be adopted, we would be standing outside the Italian embassy. I am ashamed of my country at the moment.
OK, well, I mean, we don't know all the facts. What the local authority has said is that they went to Italy and they interviewed family, they looked for family members there.
Is it that we need to look at the other end of this? So instead of, because like you say, children, as horrible as it is, but they do have to be removed if it's in the right circumstances. We all agree on that.
Absolutely.
Is it the other end then? Is it the appeal? Is it that if you suddenly go, this is wrong, why does that not happen quicker and easier?
Because you have to think about why children are removed in the first place. And very often parents will say, well, I'll change, I'll stop taking drugs, I'll stop this, I'll stop that. But if you've already, if you're 2 years down the line, and what they've done is they've speeded up the process because there's been so much delay, once a decision, a long-term decision has been made for that child, you don't want to overturn that, because it might be that child is very well established, very often with another family member, and then what will happen is the mother might say, yes, well, now I'm dry, I haven't drunk for 2 years, and then the baby might, or the child might go back to her, and then she starts drinking again, and then you've got that disruption all over again for the child. That's the difficulty.
Joanna, we have got the senior judge, Mr. Justice Mumby, saying several times in the last few weeks, bad things are happening, we have to root them out. Why won't you admit bad things are happening?
I'm not saying...
There's wonderful things going on, and good social workers are doing wonderful things.
It's important to say...
But bad things are happening too.
Of course, but I think it is important to say that we don't hear about the good things. We don't hear about the many, many cases where social services got it right.
Yeah,
but there is, obviously, as Denise points out, you know, there are recurring issues here, whether it's Victoria Klimbier or Daniel Pelker or Keanu Williams, and there are children that have been let down. And that's the case where it wasn't even a sort of secret abuse. It was obvious for everyone to see, and everybody missed it.
Yep.
And so when it's glaringly obvious, you think, how can you appear to pick on a mother who's in bed having a baby, yet miss a glaring case like that where everyone's pointing out that there's abuse?
Yeah, and that's a very fair point, Philip, but it's never as simple as that. First of all, just to be absolutely clear, social workers, we never go to court before a baby is born, because an unborn baby has no legal status. So it's not social workers who are going to court to make a mother have a cesarean. That doesn't happen. It doesn't work like that. It's adult protection. That's a completely different thing. But when you say the glaringly obvious cases, there are many areas where there will be many, many, many children very similar, living very similar lives to those children who have died these terrible deaths, and you are always making that judgment of what's the right thing to do, and there are these safety nets along the way, and ultimately it is the court. And I don't say that to try and abdicate responsibility of the social workers, but it's right that it's not just one agency who says enough is enough, we need to take that child out. It is a very draconian
courts are getting reports
action,
which are asked for by social services, and they're bad reports, and in some cases they haven't even seen the person they're reporting on. They're going off the notes of the social worker.
Actually,
that cannot be right.
I'm sorry, Denise, it's actually the court that asks for the expert, and the expert who is appointed has to be agreed by all the parties, and if the court isn't happy with the quality of the report, then that's for the court to complain about.
I just want to make one final point here, one final point, attempting to put this right. Do you lack good people on the ground? Is there a problem with retention because the good ones leave because they get battered in the way they're getting battered at the moment? And the new ones that come in, are they skilled on paper but not on the ground?
A combination of all of those things. Of course, there are some very good newly qualified social workers. The trouble is they are working in an environment where, and it always sounds so weak saying it, but when you talk to frontline social workers, they will talk about their caseloads. You're working with 50 children. You're in court with half of those cases. You are working at an impossible level, and ultimately you're feeling that you're not doing a good enough job and you're not keeping children safe, and that is a horrible way to work. So what happens is those people leave. And we have a very high turnover of staff, and none of that is good for children. Absolutely talk about the errors, of course, but let's have it balanced. We don't need all the emotion. What we need is the hard facts. If there are bad people, weed them out. Absolutely.
If we're discussing this because it reaches the pinnacle of a big story in the newspaper.
Yes.
You guys are working with it on the ground every day.
Yeah.
So if you were to attempt to put it right, as Denise is insisting it has to be put right, how is it put right? What do you need? More people? More money?
What you need is more people. You need the experienced people to stay, and in order for that to happen, you need to give them a realistic workload, you need to support them, and you've got to have the right number of social workers doing the job. We don't have enough. And I always say that if we as a society really value our most vulnerable children, and not just at these peak times, then we should resource the people who are working with them. In some countries, social workers are viewed very differently because they are there seen as supportive, and that's a huge amount of work that they do that we never hear about.
Final 10 seconds.
A proper appeals procedure with the legal profession doing its job properly. There are only a handful of lawyers in this country who really fight for their clients in the family courts.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.